morning, everybody. Welcome along to In Control Scotland's webinar Wednesday for June. I can't believe it's June. It was just Christmas 2 minutes ago. That is unbelievable. But welcome, here we are in the middle of a heatwave as well. So I'm Pauline. I'm joined by Alistair, who lots of you will know, and Brett, who lots of you won't know, who's our newest member of the second day in the job, and we make him come on to webinar Wednesday. So a good sport.
It's a gentle introduction in Control, isn't it?
Absolutely, straight in, hit the floor running, eh?
Yeah. Would you want to do a quick wee introduction to yourself, Brett? Let people know who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Brett Rogers. Worked in managed a care home in Shetland for the last few years. Before that was a LACO. Just been working in social care with various people with support needs, complex needs, stuff like that. So just got a great opportunity to work with the team in Control Scotland and other folk as well in SDS. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Excellent, and we're delighted that you've joined us. Welcome, very warm welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it, Alistair.
Yeah, so it's been a busy time. It's lots of changes. We said cheerio to Keith on Friday after many years with In Control Scotland and stuff. But that's the thing about In Control Scotland as well, isn't it? Lots of changes, things changing, and we're always trying to keep pace with everything that's going on. So we've got lots of stuff coming up as well, haven't we?
We have, and Keith says he's still going to watch and the webinars and make occasional dad joke comments, as he is prone to do. So if there's any dad jokes coming up in the stream, you know who it'll be from. So, but yeah, we've been busy over the last wee while. What have we been up to? We just had our first quarterly network yesterday, didn't we? That you led the one on general SDS, and there's one coming up for children. People were interested in children and families on Thursday.
Yeah. And
they're like a space for anybody and everybody to come together and think about, talk about, learn about SDS in practice in the real world. And they're open to people using services, unpaid carers, people working in support providers, and folk for local authorities to come together and kind of share and learn. The first session yesterday was a good one to Alistair.
It was some really interesting. So again, it's as you say, it's a space where we weren't like controlling all the topics and stuff. We were really thinking about introducing some issues and then getting what people were facing, having a bit of a discussion about who brings what and what people were looking for locally. And I guess it's a bit like an action learning set, which we're quite fond of generally in Control Scotland. Trying to make an opportunity not just for people to wait for other folk to come up with the answers, but that we come up with the solutions together, because there's a lot of really great practice out there as well. So
yeah. So if you're interested and you want to join us, they'll be happening once a quarter. So Children and Families one tomorrow. Get in touch if you want to join in. All welcome. And then our lunchtime sessions kick off again after summer holidays, don't they? We'll be kicking them back off monthly after the summer break.
Yeah.
And we're all tanned and rested, I'm sure.
All burnt.
Sunburnt.
I'll go for burnt. So thinking about today's session, we're gonna, as June's very helpfully put up in the comments, we're going to talk a bit about SDS and dementia in Scotland, as well as it being Carers Week as well. So we've got the launch of the new carer strategy, and we're just going to have Martin from our board and James Pearson from Alzheimer's Scotland joining us. So other stuff that we've got on before we bring on our guests, we've got another Getting to Grips coming up on the 6th of July. I've got let's see if I can
got a wee flyer for that. I can fill the air while you're looking for the flyer. So that's our half-day online training for anybody who wants to kind of get to grips with self-directed support. It's designed for folk who don't really have any knowledge or experience, but also as a refresher for folk who do and just want to kind of brush up on their skills. Open to everybody again. If you're using services or you're caring for someone in an unpaid role, then you are welcome to come along for free. and there's a wee charge for folk working for provider organisations. And we do that every so often, every couple of months. There we go, as if by magic.
As if by magic. So that's 6th of July, 10 till 1. The last one was really popular, wasn't it?
It was. We had to run 2 because it was so jam-packed. And I know that July is not a busy period for lots of people, but maybe we can squeeze a few folk in if we can.
So £50 to attend, but there's some free spaces for unpaid carers or people using social care. So
definitely. And the other thing that we've been working on for quite a wee while now is the National SDS Improvement Plan, which regular viewers will have heard us talk about quite a bit, and it's quite exciting to say that should be out in the wild in the public next week. 12th of June is the day for it to get officially published. So that'll be coming from, we've obviously had a change of minister in the Scottish Government, so we now have Minister Marie Todd leading health and social care policy. So she'll be helping us launch that, along with partners from Social Work Scotland and SDSS. That's exciting.
Brilliant stuff. And we've got New Routes Home on the 22nd of June, and we're also starting an impact network relating to that, looking at people coming out from hospital and stuff. And as if by magic, here's Keith with these jokes, the legendary Keith jokes. Here we go, and we've also got a hi all from Michael McEwen, who's joined us. All right, folks, will we get our guests on?
Okay, cracking, yeah.
Welcome to Martin and welcome to James.
Morning.
Hi.
Morning, folks. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Hi. Yeah. So Martin, do you want to introduce yourself and then we'll hear a bit about James?
Hi. I live up near Peterhead. I've got a rare dementia, posterior cortical atrophy. So my senses and my physical symptoms are a lot worse than my cognitive functions, if you like. And I'm not linked to any dementia organisation. And I was on the lived experience panel that helped create their strategy, and there's actually quotes from me in there. So I've got it beside me now.
Yeah, I noticed you were shy. You didn't include your photo.
No.
Everybody else had their photos. Here was anonymous Martin there.
Aye.
Air of mystery.
Brilliant.
Yep.
Brilliant. Okay. Thanks, Martin. And James, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm James Pearson, or most often known as Jim Pearson. I am the Director of Policy and Practice at Alzheimer's Scotland. My colleague and Chief Executive Henry asked me if I would join this meeting in his place. What he didn't tell me is that I was going to be on screen. And I was expected to say something. So I'm a little bit surprised. However, I hope that I can add to the conversation today.
Right, okay. Well, it's very informal. We just have a chat about current things that are going on. And I guess what we're keen to talk about today is that obviously the dementia strategy has just been launched. Alzheimer's Scotland obviously put in a bit of feedback to the consultation, and I know Martin's a long-term sort of self-advocate and always pushing for improvements and things. So I just wondered maybe if we started just by thinking about what you think the key messages from. I'll bring up on screen some of the points from the strategy and just over. I haven't got time to go through it in huge detail, but just maybe your initial thoughts about it.
Who goes first?
Is that?
Well, either of you. Who wants to go first?
At the moment, it's a bit vague, but that I think is deliberate because they're looking at the next stage is deciding on the first two priorities that we will be looking at the implementation stage, and that should be They say, I'm carefully wording all this. They say it should be all this should be started by the end of the year, if I'm right. But if you like, I say democracy is slow, because obviously because we're involved, the people with lived experience and the professionals, and I forget what that group's called. So it takes longer than kind of just being told what to do. Kind of they're asking us. It takes longer, I'm afraid. And as I said, we don't know what the next priority will be, to be honest. But I guess I've had an email asking me when I'm available for the next meeting, and it's going to be held in Aberdeen for me, basically, I think, because they get nagged by me so much. So
well, I'll need to see if I can make an appearance as well, if possible, if there's options for that.
yeah.
So these are the.
Sorry.
Yeah. Go for it.
And I think that at that point, that's where we'll be making, those experience will be looking at what should be the priorities. As an individual, I've got my own priorities, which I know won't be prioritized. However, they're in there, so I can use them as leverage, is how I see it. I can point to them to other groups and say, "Oi, they're in this." For instance, I'm heavily into mental health, so there's comments about dementia wards, which is actually a world first for a dementia strategy, and things like that. And SDS is in there. I think Pauline would have done something with that, because certainly up here in Aberdeenshire, SDS doesn't really exist for people with dementia. It's option 2. Goodbye.
Right.
Yeah, I thought there was a really interesting line in it about an aspiration of the strategy is that everybody should have access to self-directed support. And it made me think, well, that's not an aspiration of a strategy, that's a statutory duty. That's interesting. But I suppose it's reassuring it's called out in these spaces, because it's not, like you say, it's not a common kind of train of thought is to think about dementia and self-directed support, whereas it is actually, it is our social care policy as a country, But yeah. Interesting.
So it's got obviously 5 kind of key options, I guess. There, just try to think. If anybody wants to pick up on any of the, like you say, Martin, you've kind of said a little bit about, you feel it's quite general at the moment, I guess. Any other observations from yourself, Jim, about how specific it is, the breadth, the stuff about human rights and communities, anything like that you want to pick up on?
So I think the first thing to say is we absolutely welcome the strategy, and it builds on, I think, over a decade of really positive work in Scotland around setting. And I know this from our engagement at international level through Alzheimer's Disease International and outside of Europe, that Scotland is considered to have some of the most progressive dementia policy anywhere within the world. I think that's absolutely fair to say. And we've been part of that process for a long time. We've been able to work with other stakeholders and influence the national dementia strategies. I think one thing that I think is common throughout that whole thread has been collaborative work and involvement with lived experience. I think what's maybe different this time in terms of lived experiences is a lived experience panel, which actually is at the heart of the governance of the strategy and the delivery of it, which is really positive. I think we think it sets out a really positive vision for dementia policy in Scotland and practice in Scotland for over the next decade. What perhaps it lacks is that it is visionary and it sets out a really positive vision for Scotland without perhaps having as yet the kind of specific actions that it's actually going to deliver, and perhaps also around specifically what funding is going to be available to support the delivery of some elements of that strategy. So we welcome it, absolutely positive about it. We have some concerns, I suppose, about areas of dementia strategy and commitments that have been made in previous strategies that don't seem to be either explicit or in this strategy, and we set that out in a separate report that we did in response to the strategy. And yeah, I happened to be on holiday last week during Dementia Awareness Week, which my colleagues have pointed out to me several times. But I have to say the weather was fabulous. I was up in the west coast of Scotland. I can highly recommend going on holiday during Dementia Awareness Week. It also happens to be the week where the strategy was delivered. And I know that Henry had been interviewed a couple of times and has probably reiterated some of what we say. But so it's a 10-year strategy, and that's different from before, because the strategies before had been 3 years, quite short, in terms of being able to look at, you know, what we expect to deliver within a short period of time, within 3 years, and haven't done that this time. And saying what I've said here about Scotland having world leading, or what was considered world leading dementia policy, we didn't necessarily have world leading delivery of some of that. So there's a gap, I think, between the aspirations of all of the dementia strategies, and this one will be no different in what people experience in their lives. And the test of the strategy will be when we look back in 2 or 3 years' time to see how deeply is this reaching into people's life. Are these aspirations actually making a positive difference for the lives of people who are living with dementia and their families, and those families and friends that are caring for them? It's the same, you know, I think you mentioned the human rights, that human rights framework around this, and there's been a human rights-based approach underpinning the National Dementia Strategy from the word go, because we worked with the Scottish Parliament, the Cross-Party Group, and Scottish Human Rights Commission to develop that Charter of Rights that set out a framework. So there's been a commitment around human rights-based approaches and citizenship-based approaches in all of our national dementia strategies. But I've always said, you know, people don't, at the end of the day, don't look back and say, I've had a good day today, my human rights were met. They look back about the quality of their life and their relationships and their ability to participate within the community and society. And that's where human rights matter to people, the quality of the experience that they have. And so I think the real test for the strategy will be whether it delivers those things in real and meaningful ways for people.
So on the ground, yeah. Sorry, Pauline, go for it.
No, I was just going to say, and we hear that story, that same description of world leading strategy, not world leading implementation across the whole breadth of social care, don't we? We talk about self-directed support. Our social care legislation is incredibly strong and powerful, but it's the realisation of it in the real world and the implementation gaps. Same with homelessness, same with loads of different bits of policy. So it is really interesting. I think you're right. The devil will be in the detail about what those 2-year plans really look like. And I was reading through your response this morning from Alzheimer's Scotland about some of the things that you think could be your asks, I suppose, of this strategy. And a big one is about not forgetting all that work that's happened in the previous strategies, isn't it? It's about learning and consolidating and evaluating and thinking where have we come from already, and how do we take the good from that and improve the stuff that could be better. And I thought that was quite interesting. And would you say that kind of monitoring and evaluation is dead important to make sure that you know it's making a difference?
Absolutely, and I think we also understand as well that I suppose we've been a constant through this in some respects, because we've been involved directly through all of the strategies. And I don't know if it's fair to say, but I don't think government, whether it's local government, national government, they don't have that same level of institutional memory in some respects. So there's new people involved in delivering this, new ministers involved, and so things come along, and there's the new ideas, and I understand that, fully understand that. But there's real merit in looking at what have we committed to before. I think for us, some of that, you know, the priorities that came out of the very first National Dementia Strategy, there was 2 key priorities came out of it, and it was people with dementia that was telling us this, right? We need the better experiences in hospitals, and we need the better experience after we have a diagnosis. We need good quality post-diagnosis support, right? And actually, all of the strategies have been informed by the priorities that people with dementia have been saying. And actually, that whole point about experience of diagnosis the experience of what a diagnosis looks like. How long does it take people to get a diagnosis? Good quality post. We haven't solved all of that yet. And so those things still remain an issue. And I think that's mirrored across the nursing dementia strategies about key areas. And I think one of the things that I would say is that this was heralded in some ways as a new story, right? And I think our view is this isn't a new story. This is a story that is unfinished. It's a story that's been on for a while. And I get that, but we equally understand this whole thing about new ministers come in and that kind of institutional memory thing plays a part in this. But and I don't want to be critical either, because I think there is some really good stuff in this strategy. And if we can get that right and we can keep a focus on some things that have already been committed to before, and we get the delivery of this right, and we get some funding behind it and implementation, monitoring, evaluation, not just of the things that we're committing to in this strategy, but some of the things that I think need to be retained as part of previous commitments, then I think we will be able to make progress. It will be challenging. It's not just the government that delivers it. It has to be delivered at local level. It takes a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders to make this happen. But I think it's possible if we get all of those elements right.
Thanks. Martin, do you want to come in with something?
Yeah, being me, I've written an article for, is it that Health and Social Care Bulletin thing? And I say that the main reason, take post-diagnostic support, we're all meant to get it for a year. That's in law. But the average, I think, is less than 50% in it. And I basically use the 3 words, lack of resources. It's the reason for all of them, all the failures, to be honest. And that comes down to, and I'm being controversial here, not only lack of will of politicians, I think, my particular view is charities don't hit the public hard enough with what's wrong. Alzheimer's Scotland do produce reports, that's good, about the problems of long-term care, etc. But my particular view is that the public should be hit with, would you want you or your loved one to be treated like this? And then given the reality, because otherwise you get to see the flagships, which are all lovely and nice, and that's what the public focus on. And in this new strategy, there is going to be people, the civil service, but I've offered to help. They're going to be looking at the actuality, if you like, and looking at the data to see what's happening in realist time. So in that sense, I think we're moving forward, but the history is that it is down to lack of resources in the end. And it's just a question of how we get them.
So the resources is part of it, I guess. I mean, I think one of the things that is interesting about how I suppose how Alzheimer's is viewed as well, because there's that argument about you need to hit folk hard potentially. The other point is that sometimes it's about creating a different story around about how people think about it and an inclusive community, some of the positives, some of the things that are possible. And one of the things that I think that we see both in SDS generally and in relation to Alzheimer's is that power shift, because there's resources, but they're making stuff happen. I think the Scottish Government is good at producing the guidance that really says what should be done, but that I don't see all the time that implemented. Well, we don't see that it's consistently. So some people go above and beyond and really, make not just the resources, but make the effort to combine things together, to really listen and to say, look, what would it take in this area, particularly? I know you're in a rural environment. Again, that's another issue that needs to be considered. But is there anything else about the power shift that anybody thinks that could help? Because resources is one part of it, but actually that might be another valid point. I think maybe. Anybody else got any thoughts as to what other stuff other than just the resource side we should Yeah.
I think resources are clearly important, and we see, I mean, some of the crises that we see that people with dementia experiencing just now are because there is a vacuum currently in terms of access to health and particularly social care supports, and we see people going into crisis and then have an admission to hospital. People with dementia tend to stay in hospital longer, and then they tend to be on a trajectory where they're probably going to end up in a care home earlier than would otherwise be necessary or at all. And so the opportunities to intervene earlier and prevent and support people to continue to live well are missed. I think what Martin says there is really interesting, and that balance between the message you give here. There are people with dementia and families having really difficult, challenging day-to-day experiences. It's absolutely no getting away from that, and they sometimes have really poor experiences in services or getting access to services. We see that day in, day out. Our helpline, our action rights team, our dementia advisors are dealing with really complex, challenging circumstances that people are facing, some which are eye-wateringly terrible stories, right? But then there's also that issue about diagnosis, and we're still diagnosing people late on. We still have stigma, we still have fear about dementia. And the more that you see some of those negative stories, it's not just about what people think Alzheimer's disease or other types of dementia are. It's also about what you see about the experiences that other people with dementia might be having. And if none of that is reassuring to you, then you're not going to come forward for a diagnosis. So we end up diagnosing people late on in illness, and we diagnose them when they're already further progressed in illness, and we miss the opportunity to provide them with supports and tools and mechanisms and the natural supports around them to keep that community of people around them. And one thing we do know about people with dementia is that as time goes on, without support, that circle of support around them becomes increasingly fragmented. The things that they did before, they participated in communities, they stopped doing, and their circle of support shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. It's much easier to keep that together if you intervene early and work with people and their families and the communities. It's very difficult to put that back together again once it's gone. And so there's a need for balance around how we communicate and tell story about people with dementia. And it's a difficult balance to be had. You know, you can be hard hitting, you can tell the really difficult stories, but that has an impact on the other end in terms of people coming forward and talking more openly about dementia. So there's a difficult balance to be tread there that I think most people here would probably be familiar with. You know, I think Martin's wanted to disagree with it.
Sorry, I did forget to say that there should be a contrast. This is what it is, but this is what it could be. But you have to, the public have to accept that. To be blunt, the taxes might have to go up for it. Sorry, I missed that bit out. The vital bit, kind of contrast the two.
There was. Sorry. No, carry on, James. Sorry, cut you off.
Sorry. I was just going to say I probably answered the wrong question here because I strayed into that. But I think in terms of resources is important, but absolutely the delivery of this is not just down to the Scottish Government. They provide the leadership. We would expect some funding behind this. Other areas of government policy get significant elements of funding behind them. We've never had a significantly funded dementia strategy. It is the condition that impacts on a significant number of people, and it pays part of the biggest contribution to excess disability is any other condition. So I think that's important to see, and it deserves attention, it deserves funding. However, funding alone won't fix this. It needs a collaboration. It needs health and social care partnerships to be on board and working with and being part of that dementia strategy. The people responsible for delivering it need to be part of the governance, implementation, and delivery of it. And that's maybe one of the things we lost a little bit in the previous strategies. The implementation group didn't really have too many people on there that were responsible for the delivery of anything in relating to the strategy. So I think there's the involvement out in the delivery groups of this. Those people who are charged with responsibility, and of course some of it goes beyond statutory services. It's also about empowering communities, and there's a lot of work in the strategy which is about empowering communities as well, which is very important.
That's an important point. I guess I was going to just bring in, because it's Carers Week. We're going to, and you mentioned already about, you know, the circles of support and communities, and we've got to look at. There was an article in the Guardian just this last week saying about this daughter talking about her. We're getting an advert as well. Her father's sort of a dementia journey, and things that she wished she had known. 6 things that she wished she'd known at the start of that. That many people lack a practical understanding of dementia. So she talks a bit about her stepmother, you know, getting angry and frustrated with him and not understanding, you know, how the dementia was impacting the achievable goal, being, you know, communicating kindly. She talks about distraction being useful when he got upset, and you may be shamed or judged about your caregiving choices, and people from all walks of life need quality dementia care, and caregivers need support. So quite a lot of interesting things. I don't know if anybody's had a look at that or what they think about it.
I have a couple of points.
Oh yeah, go for it, Martin.
Martin,
I used to work in the shop floor of care with dementia, and it came as a shock to me when I had dementia. I mean, first of all, it was early onset, and I didn't know it was possible. But even, I mean, this is in England, and the day after my diagnosis, my wife phoned up the GP and said, "What support's available?" And the answer came, "What support do you want?" Even I was gobsmacked at that, but a normal member of the public wouldn't know what they would want.
Yeah.
And especially I wasn't too much in shock, but she was. But I was going to go back to the power thing. I actually tried to get on our Health and Social Partnership board. And if you like, my advert was I was going to give them the voices of lived experience. And they said, "No, we don't want that." They actually said that to me. And they put me onto what's called a strategy group. And that's worse than useless. Grampian has its own problems, severe major problems with its health board. But again, I don't know what's going to happen because I'm discussing it this afternoon with the head of dementia from Grampian, 1-to-1. Because as I say, there are major problems up here. So hopefully we might get something looked at. But there is definitely that power imbalance. Because even that, the patient reps don't have a vote on the boards at the moment.
Yeah, Martin, one of the things I was going to say was, since that we're talking about unpaid carers and dementia in this conversation, one of the very first times we spoke, Martin, that you said something and it's stuck with me ever since, and that was the best part of a year ago. And you talked about when your wife was looking for support as your partner in care, and she was told, "You married him in sickness and in health. It's your lot to get on with."
Yeah,
and
that was Scottish wide for a while, but obviously we slammed in the complaint, and I think a few others did, so they did change the wording, shall we say.
I mean, I would be hopeful that I mean, unpaid carers and care partners, they're referred to in the new strategy, they come over so strongly in the new strategy that I would hope that this is a perception that's, if it's not shifting now, then it's in the process of shifting. But it still fills my heart with absolute horror that that's a conversation that people going through really difficult times have had to have. So I'm really pleased to see the focus on unpaid carers within the new strategy, and the recognition that actually unpaid carers are the biggest part of our social care workforce. They are there are more of them than anybody else. And I saw a thing this morning about the statistics of the number of people who are entitled to unpaid carers allowance is really small. It's only about 10% of the unpaid carers in Scotland that are actually in receipt of carers allowance. So there's a huge amount of support that could be offered to folk beyond just the kind of broad brush support that is made available, and SDS being a part of that as well. If you are eligible for support as an unpaid carer, you should be using SDS to be able to use your budget creatively. So yeah, a big timely focus, I suppose, on people who are providing support day in, day out without a break for their loved ones. So yeah, I'm glad to see that recognition coming through in the new strategy, and I hope that mindset changes so people don't have to have that conversation like you had, Martin, because that's awful.
And at least you're having direct conversations with people, and if that then results in some real change, it'll be really valuable. What about this idea of dementia friendly communities and stuff, I guess, as well? What else can we do as a wider, not as a services solution? What can we do to create? Because I think that's one of the things that, particularly in Control Scotland's all about, is sometimes we look to services first when we get a diagnosis of anything, and we look for a very, this fits this box, I'm going to get this service. We've recognised that doesn't always, it's not always a holistic. It doesn't always give you the best quality of life. It might meet your physical needs, but for a lot of the things, it's like, how do you get to do the things that really matter to you? Are there ways you can connect to people in a way that helps them to support you to do different things as part of the community? What can we all be doing to help that?
As someone with dementia, I get thrown drugs every now and then. And they say, oh, that one didn't work, let's try that one. And I know it's just a waste of time. But equally, I know I'm old and strange, because the only treatment that works for me is academic research. Sounds strange, but it does. Because I'm not showing off, but my IQ is still 120 7 years after diagnosis. And once the neurologist sat up and kind of stopped fainting, we discussed it, and we realised that's because I keep my brain so active. My phrase is, I call it catnip to the brain. And there are peer-to-peer groups, but I feel they're too enclosed. I prefer to. My view is we should be part of wider society. And I don't like. By the way, I don't like dementia friendly. I call it dementia inclusive.
Right. Okay.
And I think quite a few activists are like that. And I'm not sure how Alzheimer's feel about it. But I would say, and Alzheimer's do have groups within the community, which is good. Kind of the library, the cafes, whatever. So I think we should be part of society.
Yeah, and I think some of the stuff that comes through the stuff that comes out the clearest in the strategy is the voices of people who are either living with dementia or caring for folk that are living with dementia. And there was the story about the guy whose dad had died. He had Korsakoff's, I think, and how he was no longer seen as that upstanding father that raised 7 kids and a strong guy. He was seen as that guy with the Korsakoff's and alcohol-related brain damage. And it's just that perception of people is less than they're human. It's that kind of like we're and that story as well in the Guardian talks about none of the things that are listed in that are big service interventions, medical, clinical, anything. They're all about seeing you as a human being and having good conversations and being kind and seeing somebody as more than a product of their deficiencies. And I think that's definitely that's something that we would argue for a lot, is that actually, yeah, people are people and everybody's different. And Martin, if academic research works for you, then amazing. It won't work for everybody, and that's the point. No. It's about making sure that whatever makes your life worth living is available to you, and you've got the support you need to do it.
There's something about I think how we understand and talk about dementia is really important, and I think the community creating inclusive society that understand dementia better, that are not scared to talk about it, that provide people with opportunity to continue to be part of the things that they did as their everyday, whatever that community is for them, but to have choice and options if they want to be involved in peer support groups. Absolutely, right? And there's a lot of opportunity like that. So Alzheimer's Scotland, we've got 26 dementia resource centres across Scotland. We provide a lot of those community-based supports. We have football reminiscence groups, music groups. We have an outdoor dementia resource centre. There's a whole network of meeting centres that have been developing over years that are providing opportunities to support people in different ways within their communities. But I think you also want to equip families and friends with the confidence to be able to continue to be part of the life of somebody with dementia. And that's the bit that's missing. I think that's where something like good quality post-diagnostic support is really important, because that early intervention can work with that individual and their network of support to equip them with the knowledge and the skills and understanding of dementia and give them the confidence to stay part of somebody's life. So there's a need to kind of mix some of that formal and informal supports to try and keep some of that community stuff together as well. And that requires early diagnosis, and that requires people to break down some of the barriers and the stigma and the fear and all that. So there's an environment you need to create here that is about everything to get that right. And we're a long way away from that, but there's no reason we can't be ambitious and try to reach out. I thought the article that you referred to there was really powerful and a really strong testimony. People have different experiences of dementia. And we work with a group of people in the Scottish Dementia Working Group who are strong advocates like Martin. They also have a very different experience of somebody who develops dementia quite late on in life, that maybe accelerates quite quickly. And then you see this experience that this family carer has described, and the difficulty they have in navigating the complex dynamics, the changes in relationships, the changes in understanding between her parents, how her mum understood the changes that were happening in her husband, how he didn't understand when she was ill, and his lack of compassion. The dynamics there are unbelievably complex. And that's the reality that some people are dealing with as well. So, there is some people in the Scottish Dementia Working Group and others have said, if you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. It's absolutely true, right? Because their experience is always unique. And not only is that unique, so is that of the family, so is that of their and the complex relationships. Because you talk about family split as a consequence of trying to understand what was happening there in terms of the changes in dad. That stuff's really difficult. Me, personal story, my mum had dementia and she died in 2012. And by the time she was developing dementia, I'd been working with Alzheimer's Scotland for nearly 12 years. And I've got 4 older sisters. And a younger brother. And I thought, hey, I've got this sorted. I've been working with Alzheimer's Scotland for 12 years. I know what to do here, right? No. And actually taking that into your family and with all of that, it's, having knowledge and understanding something and then trying to implement that and trying to convince them, it's really difficult because they were all informed by their own experiences, their own understanding of dementia. And that was an enlightening time for me, because I realised that everything I'd been doing up until then, where I thought I'm giving people information, I'm supporting them, I'm empowering them to take that into their family. What I didn't realise was just how difficult that is to actually do something with in the complex dynamics of those relationships. That story is a real window into what some people are living with dementia.
Yeah.
And what families are, and I think and for me, it tells you some of the real challenge that they face and what faces us as a country in terms of how we respond to some of those really complex needs, because that's what's happening in day-to-day lives across the country.
My first meeting with a care manager when I came up here, she actually said, "You haven't got dementia." Because she was expecting me to be no memory, everything else. So she said, "You're lying." She actually said, "You are lying." After I came off the ceiling, I had to go and get my letters from the consultant. But again, it took us about 18 months to go back to care services. And then we got that phone call. So that's kind of, and then Ethel, my wife's still not over that phone call. She's still brittle about it.
Yeah, that
So
that's
that
yeah, that sort of hoops to jump through can be really hard. I'm just going to come back to James just before we wrap up, because that's just 45 minutes.
oh my
in.
God,
The time has flown in, but just in terms of that, the sort of the focus we've got on people's mental health nowadays, and the caring roles, and all the things you've got to juggle. And just within my community, in the street that I'm in, I've had a couple of neighbours with dementia, because I've been coming on for 30 years in the same street. So I've seen, folk growing older, and like one woman, her husband had dementia, and he fell, and she called our daughter, like, in her, and it was like, why did you not call me? I'm 2 doors up. You could have just chopped it. But there's still a thing about permission to let people in, and well, you're not part of that. You're just a neighbour. But I said, for God's sake, just give me a phone, give me a chap on the door. She's busy struggling to lift them up, anxious. So that, and then with my other neighbour, I ended up, she struggled to get a lot of the support that she needed. So I just did, first thing in the morning, I did her pills and helped her to find her purse. And we just put little tile finders on, and we played Hunt the Purse, and we made a game of it, and we had a laugh. But because I had that relationship with her for that length of time, I could do that. And there was two retired women in the street who also did little bits. And it's amazing how, if people, it wasn't a big thing to do. We all really liked her and got on well with her. And if we all got to do little bits, that was something that subsequently she needed more support, and she needed somebody coming in. But that enabled her to stay for a good length of time more in her house. And I think that sometimes if we can have that conversation, where create the community where it's okay to say, "Are you okay? Could I do something?" Sometimes we're a bit like, "Oh no, that has to be a service,"
That's the thing. There's no such thing as independence. We're all interdependent. And I think we forget that sometimes, that there's more to life than being independent and doing everything for yourself. We are, a huge amount to be gained from community. I like that. So God, better wrap up, James. Any final thoughts from yourself, James?
Well, just to maybe just to add to what you said there about interdependence, totally agree. I always remember hearing, and I can't remember his name now, hearing somebody speak about, and somebody who was using at the time direct payments and became a great advocate for it, talking about that, and talking about, we're all dependent, so I don't go into the field and bring the cow in and milk cow and stuff. Somebody does that, brings it to the shop locally, and I go to the shop, and he said, all I need is a little bit of help to get to the shop, to get the milk. Actually, it's not that different from you, because you don't do it. So I get that. And I always remember one of our Scottish Dementia Work Group members, who sadly is no longer with us, talking about, never mind dementia-friendly communities. I'd be quite happy with a dementia-friendly street. And he actually worked with his neighbours. He went out with his family and his neighbours, and he spoke to them, and he went to the local shop, the corner, and told them everything about what. And he actually, had really open conversations with them about how they could still be part of his life. Now, that puts the onus on him. But I think that's a really important message Alistair just mentioned there, about the role that we can all play within communities, and how we need to lift our heads up a little bit and look over the fence from our garden, and think about the people round about us, actually, and maybe also other people, welcoming people in to help them as well, rather than making a phone call at the daughter that's 40 miles away or whatever. But thank you for having me. I'll mention to Henry that he didn't tell me in advance that I was going to be doing this. But yeah, thanks very much. It's been it's actually been really enjoyable once I got over the scare that I was going to be speaking.
Thanks so much, James. I'd love to hear, Brett, have you got any reflections on your first webinar? Anything you want to say? Not to put you on the spot in your first one, but
yeah, it's so insightful, hearing from everyone, particularly Martin and James. Just quick story about when I was working in a care home in Shetland, going on what Alistair and James were picking up about local communities. we set up it's a smaller community in Shetland and very close knit, but we had a young lady that kept leaving the care home, especially through the pandemic. But of course, she was very stressed. But we were told by families and some of the general public that we should have a locked door policy rather than an open door, which I refuted completely. So we left this open door, but we worked with the local community, the police, the OTs, general public, and Alzheimer's Scotland, Shetland. Jan and her team were amazing because they put out education to the local community that this young lady will be walking every day to get her local 20 cigarettes and her groceries at the local shop. She won't look for traffic. She will just walk across the road. And in the end, everyone got to know her name within that community. She went and got her cigarettes and groceries and came back, and she was happy as Larry. So it can work if, you know, the thought and the purpose is there to do it. So yeah, just a quick story on that.
Brilliant. Martin, any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, similar theme. When I first came up, maybe I obviously still do it. I walk like a drunk, and going around, I have a walk I do around the village, and the first couple of weeks, people said, "You're drunk, you shouldn't be out," sort of thing. I had my dog, but I went to who I knew was a local gossip, and I told them the reality, and within a couple of days, everyone knew, and they were kind of really kind of enabling and that kind of helping and allowing for me. So that was good.
Right, brilliant. So that's being proactive and helping people to understand and not reach judgments. I guess that's the thing, isn't it? All right.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us to our panel, and for everybody watching and listening and making comments. We'll see you first Wednesday of July, same time, same channel. Enjoy the sunshine, folks, if you have it, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.